Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I've been looking forward to this cruise for months. My wife and I desperately needed a break, and when my parents offered to come along and help with the kids, we jumped at the chance. The week at sea was everything we hoped for. Calm waters, good food, and best of all, no drama. Everyone on board seemed to be on their best behavior, but I should have known better than to think we'd escape completely unscathed. The last morning arrived and we packed up our cabin with mixed feelings. Sad to leave, but ready to get back to reality. We hauled our luggage through the ship's narrow corridors and made our way down to the disembarkation area. The port was absolute chaos. Thousands of people trying to leave at once, all searching for their rides, their families, their lost belongings. I stayed close to my wife while we navigated through the crowd. Once we finally made it outside, my wife pulled out her phone to order a ride. She tapped away at the screen while I kept an eye on our bags. My parents had already left earlier that morning on a different flight, so it was just the two of us dealing with all the luggage. My wife told me she got a car and it was only 2 minutes away. Usually these things took at least 15 or 20 minutes, especially with how busy the port was. She confirmed it would be there any second. I started mentally preparing to load everything quickly so we wouldn't hold up the driver. Sure enough, less than 2 minutes later, my wife spotted the car pulling up to the curb. She said that was our ride and headed over to make sure it was the right one. She walked over to the vehicle while I started dragging our suitcases toward the pickup area. I watched her lean down to talk through the passenger window, checking the details on her phone against whatever the driver was telling her. She gave me a thumbs up, confirming it was our ride. Just when I got within a few feet of the car, this guy came sprinting over from somewhere behind me. He was red in the face, sweating, and looked like he was about to have a meltdown. He announced that he'd finally found his ride and that he'd been waiting 30 minutes for it. My wife turned to look at him confused. She asked him what he was talking about. He insisted this was his ride and that he'd been standing nearby waiting forever. My wife told him no, this was our ride. She had just ordered it. The guy argued back that he'd been waiting half an hour and this was his car. My wife held up her phone, showing him the screen with all the ride details displayed clearly. She pointed out the make and model of the car, the license plate, and the driver's name. She told him again that this was our ride. The guy barely looked at her phone before shaking his head. He said he didn't care what her phone said. He ordered this ride first and he'd been waiting. My wife asked if he could show her his phone then. He refused and said he didn't need to show her anything. He knew this was his ride. Now I was getting annoyed. This was ridiculous. But before I could say anything, the guy walked right past my wife and stuck his head practically inside the car window to talk directly to the driver. I couldn't hear what he was saying, but I could see the driver responding, pointing at his phone, clearly trying to explain something. The conversation went on for what felt like forever, but was probably only 30 seconds or so. Finally, the guy pulled his head back out of the car, looking even more furious than before. The driver leaned out his window to address all of us. The driver explained what had happened. He said this guy did order a ride from him earlier. When the driver got to the port, he sent a message saying he was there but needed to use the restroom real quick and would be ready in a couple minutes. The guy canceled the ride, then he ordered another ride, got matched with the same driver again. The driver sent the same message about being in the bathroom, and the guy canceled again. My wife and I exchanged a look. This was getting absurd. The driver continued, saying that after that he finished up in the restroom and accepted my wife's request. He came straight over. Took less than 2 minutes. The guy's face had gone from red to almost purple. He said that was ridiculous and that he'd been waiting this whole time. He said the driver should have gotten him first. The driver pointed out that the guy had canceled twice. He couldn't give him a ride he didn't want. The guy yelled that he wanted it now. My wife told him that's not how any of this works. I started loading our bags into the trunk while this guy continued to argue with the driver. He was going in circles, insisting that his wait time somehow entitled him to our ride. The driver remained surprisingly calm, but I could tell he was done with the conversation. We got the last bag in and climbed into the back seat. The driver put the car in gear. When we started pulling away from the curb, I heard the guy absolutely lose it behind us. He shouted after us, calling us names and saying thanks for being jerks. The driver stopped the car, stuck his head out the window, and shouted back. He told the guy not to cancel twice and expect a ride. Then we drove off, leaving the guy standing there on the sidewalk, still yelling after us. I laughed. My wife was shaking her head, smiling despite herself. She asked if I could believe what just happened. I told her at least we got out of there fast. The guy basically held our spot in line for us. The driver agreed and mentioned that some people just don't understand how ride-sharing works. He said that was the third person this week who'd done that to him. We made it to the airport in record time thanks to our very patient driver and the entitled jerk who had perfectly timed his cancellations to benefit us instead. My brother and I used to be close when we were younger. Not best friends or anything, but we got along. That started to change once we got older and I started noticing patterns. Our mom always made excuses for him. Always. If he messed up at school, she'd blame the teacher. If he got fired from a job, she'd say his boss had it out for him. If he hurt someone's feelings, she'd say they were just being too sensitive. I learned pretty early on that pointing any of this out would just get me labeled as the difficult one. When he started dating his ex about 7 years ago, I was honestly happy for him. She was kind, funny, and grounded in a way he wasn't. We hit it off immediately. She became more than just my brother's girlfriend. She became my friend. When they had their son, I was over the moon. I loved that kid from the second I met him. I babysat whenever they needed it, showed up to every little milestone, and made sure he knew his aunt would always be there for him. Things seemed okay for a while. They had their ups and downs like any couple, but nothing that screamed disaster. Then, when their son was about 2 years old, my brother just checked out. I don't mean he became distant, I mean he fully abandoned them. He moved out without much warning, started seeing someone new almost immediately, and stopped contributing in any meaningful way. No consistent child support, no regular calls, no visits. He just vanished into his new life like his son didn't exist. The few times child support payments did come through, they were late and never the full amount. His ex told me he owed her over $3,000 in back payments within the first year alone. She tried reaching out to him multiple times, sending texts and emails about their son's milestones, hoping he'd care enough to respond. He rarely did. When he did reply, it was always vague promises about visiting soon that never happened. I watched his ex struggle through all of it. She worked 2 jobs for a while, just to keep their apartment. She'd drop their son off at daycare at 7 in the morning, work her first shift, pick him up, take him to my place or her mom's, then head to her second job until 10 at night. She cried to me on the phone more times than I can count, but she never once bad-mouthed him in front of their son. She kept showing up, kept being a good mom, and somehow held it all together. I kept showing up too. I wasn't going to abandon that kid just because my brother did. I took him to the park on weekends, helped him learn his colors and numbers, and made sure he had at least one stable person besides his mom in his life. About a year ago, out of nowhere, my brother resurfaced. He didn't ease back in slowly or apologize for disappearing. He went straight into demanding mode. He wanted his ex's new address right away. She had moved to a different part of town for a fresh start and didn't want him showing up unannounced, especially since he'd been gone so long. She called me one afternoon and asked me not to give out her address if my brother came asking. She sounded worried, and I understood why. She told me he'd been sending her aggressive messages, saying he had rights, and that she couldn't keep his son from him. I told her I wouldn't say anything. When my brother called me a few days later asking for the address, I refused. I explained that if he genuinely wanted to reconnect with his son, he needed to do it the right way through lawyers and proper channels. He completely lost it on me. He said I was betraying him and choosing his ex over my own blood. He told me I had no idea what it was like to be a parent and that I should stay out of it. Our mom called me later that same day and backed him up, telling me I should support him no matter what because that's what family does. She said he was trying to be better and that I was making it harder for him. I tried explaining that his ex wasn't blocking him from seeing their son. She just wanted it done properly, so there was legal protection in place. My mom didn't want to hear it. She accused me of being influenced by his ex and said I was turning my back on my own brother. He found the address anyway. I still don't know how. Maybe through mutual friends or social media. The moment he got it, he didn't reach out to talk or apologize. He filed for custody, not just visitation. He wanted significant custody despite having been absent for years. He was asking for split custody, 50-50 time, as if he'd been there all along. His ex was blindsided. She'd been open to letting him see their son gradually, but this felt like an attack. She had to hire a lawyer, which cost her money. She didn't have. She told me the retainer alone was $2,500. She had to borrow from her parents just to afford it. The case went to court. Both sides had to present their arguments, and I was asked to testify. His ex's lawyer called me because I'd witnessed everything from the beginning. I didn't want to be there. I didn't want to choose between them in front of a judge. But I also couldn't lie, not when the well-being of a 5-year-old was at stake. So I told the truth. I explained that my brother had been completely absent for years, that his ex had done everything alone, that their son barely remembered him, and that suddenly jumping into a major custody arrangement didn't seem like it was in the child's best interest. I talked about how many times his ex had tried to reach out, how many missed birthdays there were, how many times their son asked where his dad was. I explained that I'd been there for doctor's appointments, school events, and bedtime stories while my brother was nowhere to be found. My brother's lawyer tried to make it seem like I was biased, but I just stuck to the facts. The judge asked me directly if I thought my brother was ready to take on 50% custody. I said no. I said he needed to prove himself first, show that he could be consistent, and rebuild the trust he'd broken. The judge didn't strip my brother of his rights, but the ruling didn't go the way he wanted. He was given supervised visitation every other weekend with the possibility of increasing it over time if he stayed consistent. He also had to start paying his back child support, which totaled over $6,000 by that point. It was fair. It gave him a chance to rebuild the relationship without uprooting the kid's entire life. My brother didn't see it that way. He blamed me entirely. He sent me a long, angry text saying I should have lied or stayed silent because we're siblings. He said I humiliated him in front of the judge and ruined his reputation. He told me I was dead to him. Our mom joined in, calling me repeatedly to say I destroyed his chance to be a good father and that I betrayed the family. She kept telling me how disappointed she was. She said I should have thought about how this would affect him instead of siding with an outsider. I tried reminding her that her grandson was the one who mattered most here, but she just kept defending my brother. My brother stopped speaking to me altogether. I don't regret what I did. That kid deserves stability. He deserves adults who put his needs first, not their egos. But the fallout has been brutal. My mom acts like I committed some unforgivable sin. My brother treats me like I'm dead to him. Family gatherings are tense when I'm even invited anymore. My mom invited me to Thanksgiving but made it clear my brother would be there with his new girlfriend and I should expect things to be uncomfortable. I've been called selfish, disloyal, and heartless more times than I can count. Extended family members who only heard my brother's side have messaged me saying I should apologize. But here's the thing. I still see my nephew regularly. His mom and I are still close. He's thriving. He's happy. He just started kindergarten, and he's doing great. And my brother? He's been inconsistent with his visitation already. He's canceled 3 times in the past 2 months. Once because he had plans with his girlfriend. Once because he said he wasn't feeling well. And once he just didn't show up at all. His ex had to explain to their son each time why his dad wasn't coming. It's exactly what I was afraid would happen. The supervised visitation supervisor even noted in her reports that my brother seemed disengaged during visits, often on his phone instead of interacting with his son. So no, I don't feel guilty for telling the truth, not when it protected someone who actually needed protecting. The neighbor next door seemed friendly when I first moved in. She had 2 boys around 9 and 11, and they were always asking to come over and use the pool. I didn't mind initially. My daughter liked having other kids around, and I figured it was the neighborly thing to do. I'd set some ground rules, watch them while they swam, make sure everyone stayed safe. That changed last Thursday. I was inside making sandwiches for lunch when I heard my daughter screaming. Not the playful kind of screaming, the terrified kind. I dropped everything and ran outside. The two boys had my daughter's head underwater. They were laughing, taking turns, pushing her down every time she tried to come up for air. Her arms were flailing, splashing everywhere. I jumped in fully clothed and yanked her away from them. My daughter was coughing and crying, clinging to me like her life depended on it. The boys just treaded water, staring at me. I demanded to know what they thought they were doing. The older one said they were just playing. I told them playing doesn't involve someone not being able to breathe. The younger one said it was funny that my daughter kept trying to get away. My daughter was shaking in my arms, still coughing up water. I asked her how long they'd been doing this. She said they held her under 3 times before I came out. 3 times. I got my daughter out of the pool first, wrapped her in a towel, made sure she was okay. Then I turned back to those boys. I ordered them out of the pool immediately. They climbed out slowly, still not looking concerned. I told them they could have killed her, asked if they understood that. I said they were drowning her. The older boy insisted they weren't drowning her, that it was just a game. I told them it stops being a game when someone can't breathe. I asked if they would think it was funny if someone did that to them. Neither of them answered. I ordered them to leave and not come back. I walked them to the fence gate and watched them go back to their own yard. My daughter was still crying when I got back to her. She told me they'd been doing mean things for weeks, splashing water in her face when I wasn't looking, pushing her off the pool float, calling her names. I asked why she didn't tell me sooner. She said she thought they were just being boys, and she didn't want to be a tattletale. That made me even angrier. I dried her off and got her inside. Then I went to their house and knocked on the door. Their mother answered. She was in yoga pants and a tank top, holding a glass of wine even though it was barely noon. I told her that her boys just tried to drown my daughter. Karen said she was sure they were just playing, that boys will be boys. I explained they held her head underwater and she couldn't breathe. I said this wasn't playing. I told her they'd been bullying my daughter for weeks. Karen rolled her eyes and said kids always rough around in pools. She said I needed to toughen my daughter up instead of coddling her. I told her I was letting her know that her boys weren't allowed in my pool anymore, that she needed to keep them on her property. Karen said I couldn't ban kids from a pool, that it was cruel. She said her boys loved that pool and I was being selfish. I said I could ban whoever I wanted from my property and they weren't welcome anymore. Karen said this was ridiculous, that I was overreacting, and she said her boys would never actually hurt anyone. I told her if they came onto my property again, I would call the police. I said that wasn't a threat but a promise. Karen laughed and said I was insane. She said good luck explaining to the cops that kids were just having fun in a pool. I walked away before she could argue anymore. My daughter didn't want to go in the pool for the next few days. I couldn't blame her. I checked the camera footage from that afternoon, watched it back several times. Clear as day. Those boys holding her under, her struggling, them laughing. I saved the file to my computer and backed it up to a flash drive. The footage showed everything I needed. My daughter thrashing in the water, the boys taking turns, them high-fiving each other when they finally let her up. I also went back through older footage from the past month, found multiple instances of them being rough with her, pushing her, splashing her when she tried to get away. One video showed the older boy pulling her underwater by her ankle. I saved all of it. Yesterday afternoon, I was in my home office when I got a notification on my phone. One of the cameras had detected movement in the backyard. I pulled up the live feed. The two boys were in my yard. They climbed over the fence. They weren't getting in the pool though. They were standing at the edge pulling down their swim trunks. They were peeing in my pool. Both of them, just standing there, relieving themselves directly into the water, laughing the whole time. The older one was filming it on his phone. I grabbed my phone and headed outside. By the time I got there, they were climbing back over the fence. I yelled at them to stop. They froze. I told them to stay right there. The older one said They weren't doing anything. I said I had cameras and saw exactly what they did. And I reminded them I told their mother what would happen if they came on my property again. The younger one started to look worried. He asked if I was really going to call the cops over a joke. I said yes, I was. I called the police right there in front of them. They tried to run, but I told them if they left, it would only make things worse. They stood there fidgeting, looking at each other nervously. The older one kept checking his phone. The officers arrived about 20 minutes later. I showed them the footage from today, then the footage from last week, the drowning incident. Then I showed them the compilation I had made of all the times they bullied my daughter over the past month. The officers watched everything carefully. One of them asked to speak to the boys alone. The boys started talking immediately, started saying their mom told them to do it, that she said I deserved it for being mean and banning them from the pool, that she said it would be funny, that she told them to record it and send it to her. The officers asked if this was true, if their mother told them to do this. The younger boy confirmed it. He said yes, she told them to jump the fence and pee in the pool. He said she told them it would teach me a lesson for thinking I'm better than everyone. The older boy pulled out his phone and showed them the text messages from their mother. Clear instructions, times to do it when I'd probably be inside, telling them to make sure they really soak the water. The officers asked if they could take screenshots of the messages. The older boy handed over his phone. The officers went next door. I could hear Karen yelling from my yard. Something about how I was ruining her life, how I was a terrible person, how her boys did nothing wrong. I heard her say I was harassing her family, that I was trying to criminalize children being children. The yelling went on for about 10 minutes. Then it got quiet. They came back 20 minutes later. One officer told me they'd issued her a citation for trespassing by proxy and contributing to the delinquency of minors. He said they also cited her for criminal mischief since she'd instructed her children to vandalize my property. He said if anything like this happened again, there would be criminal charges. He also said they documented the incident from last week with a drowning, and if I wanted to pursue charges for that, I could. He said with the video evidence and the pattern of behavior, I'd have a strong case. I said I just wanted them to leave us alone. The officer said they made it very clear that any further contact or trespassing would result in immediate arrest. He also suggested I consider getting a restraining order if the harassment continued. I thanked them and went back inside. Through the window, I could see Karen screaming at her boys in their driveway. They were crying. She kept pointing at my house. Then she pointed at them. She was yelling so loud I could hear her through the closed windows. My daughter came up beside me and asked what happened. I told her the boys wouldn't be bothering us anymore. She asked if they got in trouble. I said yes, they did. She seemed relieved. She asked if she could go swimming again. I told her we needed to clean the pool first. I had the pool drained and professionally cleaned the next day. The company I hired said they needed to do a full chemical treatment and sanitization. Cost me $800, worth every penny to know that water was completely sanitized. They finished by late afternoon and refilled it. My daughter went swimming that evening. She seemed happy again. The woman next door doesn't make eye contact anymore. When she sees me outside, she goes back in her house. The boys haven't been in their backyard since. I've seen them looking out their window a few times, but they disappear when they notice me. The whole family seems to avoid even looking in the direction of my property. A week later, I got a letter in my mailbox. It was from Karen's lawyer, threatening to sue me for emotional distress to her children, claiming I'd traumatized them by involving the police. I took the letter straight to my own lawyer. He laughed when he read it. He said, with the video evidence and the police report, she didn't have a case. He sent a response letter explaining that any further harassment would result in a countersuit. I haven't heard from her since. I kept all the camera footage, backed it up in 3 different places, cloud storage, external hard drive, and a flash drive in my safe. If she tries anything else, I'll be ready. I keep my work life and home life separate. At the office, I'm someone people come to when they're carrying weight they can't handle alone. At home, I'm just a mom trying to get my 9-year-old son to finish his homework and stop leaving his shoes in the middle of the hallway. My son has this classmate whose mom I see at pickup almost every day. From the first time we met, something about me seemed to bother her. I'd say hello, and she'd give me this tight smile before making some comment about how nice it must be to sit around listening to people complain all day. Or she'd catch my eye in the parking lot and throw out something about how I probably analyze everyone I meet. I never took the bait. People misunderstand what I do all the time and they think it's easy or that I spend my days judging people. So I'd just smile and change the subject or walk away. My son and her son aren't best friends, but they play together sometimes. They're 9. They argue over who gets the ball first or whose turn it is on the swings. Normal stuff. Last Thursday they got into it on the playground. I don't even know what started it. One of them bumped the other, someone said something back, and it turned into pushing. Nothing serious. The teacher on duty separated them right away and had them both sit on the bench for a few minutes. When I came to pick up my son, the teacher mentioned it in passing. She said both boys were fine and that it had been handled. I thanked her and figured that was the end of it. Then I saw her. Karen was standing near the gate with her arms crossed, staring at me. The moment I got close, she walked straight toward me, fast. She said we needed to talk. Her voice had an edge to it. I stopped and tried to keep my voice calm. I asked her what was going on. She said my son had pushed her son today. Hard. I reminded her that the teacher said they both got into it and she handled it. I apologized that they had a disagreement. She stepped closer. Her voice got louder. Other parents started turning around. She said, it wasn't just a disagreement. She said my kid has issues. Then she brought up my job. She said I was supposed to be a therapist, so why couldn't I fix my own son? I felt my face go hot. I looked around and saw people staring. I said this had nothing to do with my job, but they were kids. They had a fight. It was dealt with. She wasn't done. She turned slightly so more people could hear her. She said, if I couldn't even control my own kid, how was anyone supposed to trust me to help theirs? She said I sit there all day acting like I have all the answers, but to look at my son. She said maybe I should focus on my own family before I go bossing other people around. I stood there frozen. My throat felt tight. I wanted to say something back, but I couldn't find the words. She kept going. She said therapists think they're so much better than everyone else, but really we're just failed parents trying to tell the rest of the world how to live. I finally managed to speak. I said that wasn't fair. She didn't know anything about me. She ignored me. She turned to the other parents standing nearby like she was performing for them. She asked them if they agreed. She said if I couldn't even raise my own kid, what was I doing giving advice to anyone else? No one said anything. A few people looked down at the ground. One mom I usually chat with suddenly became very interested in her phone. I felt alone. My son was standing a few feet behind me. I could see him out of the corner of my eye. He was staring at the ground with his hands stuffed in his pockets. His face was red. I took his hand and walked to the car without saying another word. I couldn't trust myself to speak. If I opened my mouth, I was going to cry, and I wasn't going to give her that satisfaction. The drive home was quiet. My son didn't say anything until we were almost at the house. He asked me if I was bad at my job. I had to pull over. I couldn't drive anymore. I asked him what he meant. I asked why he would ask that. He said it was because of what she said. She said I couldn't help people if I couldn't help him. I turned to look at him. His eyes were watery. I said that wasn't true. Not even a little bit. I explained that she was angry and she said things to hurt me. But none of it was true. He asked why no one said anything then. Why did they just stand there? I didn't have a good answer for that. I still don't. I said that sometimes people don't know what to say. That doesn't mean they agreed with her. He nodded, but I could tell he didn't believe me. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying it in my head. Her voice, the way people looked away, my son's question. I spend my days helping people carry things they can't carry alone. I sit with their pain and their fear and their shame, and I try to help them find a way forward. I don't think I'm better than anyone. I just do my job. And at home, I try my best. I make breakfast and help with homework and show up at pickup every single day. I'm not perfect, but I'm trying. But in that moment, standing in front of everyone, she made me feel like I was nothing. Like everything I do is worthless. The worst part wasn't even what she said about me. It was that my son heard it. He's 9 years old, and now he's questioning whether his mom is good at what she does because some angry woman decided to humiliate me in public. She didn't just attack me, she attacked my work, my ability to help people, my ability to be a good parent. And for what? Because two kids got into a fight on the playground. That's not just entitlement, that's cruelty. I've been carpooling with this guy from work for some months now. We usually took turns driving, but that day I was behind the wheel because he'd just gotten out of a dental appointment and was still a bit loopy from the numbing stuff they'd given him. We were heading back through town when we drove past the Veteran Cemetery on Route 12. It's this sprawling place with rows and rows of white headstones, all perfectly lined up like soldiers standing at attention. I'd driven past it 100 times, maybe more, but I always did the same thing. I said hi to my dad out loud without really thinking about it. Just a quick greeting to a headstone I couldn't even see from the road. My co-worker turned his head toward me, his cheek still puffy on one side. He asked if my dad was buried there. I told him yeah. Then he asked if my dad was a vet. I confirmed that he was, said he served in Vietnam. There was a pause. I could feel him looking at me, probably trying to figure out if he should say something respectful or just leave it alone. But then curiosity got the better of him. He asked what my dad was like after he came back from the war. I didn't even hesitate. I told him that my dad was a drunk who hit us. The car got quiet for about 2 seconds. Then I heard this weird choking sound coming from the passenger seat. I looked over and saw my co-worker's face turning red, his hand flying up to cover his mouth. His shoulders were shaking. He was trying not to laugh, and that's when I lost it too. I started cracking up so hard I had to grip the steering wheel tighter just to keep us on the road. The two of us were cackling like idiots, tears streaming down our faces, while other drivers probably wondered what the hell was going on in our car. My co-worker apologized between gasps, saying he shouldn't have laughed and that he shouldn't have even asked the question in the first place. I told him not to worry about it and that it was actually hilarious. He asked if I was sure because he felt like a terrible person. I explained that if I couldn't laugh at my own trauma about my dead dad, what else was I supposed to do? He wiped his eyes and let out a long breath, still looking guilty but also relieved that I wasn't offended. He asked again if I was really okay with talking about it because he didn't want to be that guy who brings up heavy stuff and then makes jokes about it. I reassured him that I was fine and that it had been years since my dad died. And it had been. My dad died when I was 19. He'd been sick for a while before that, liver failure from all the drinking. By the time he finally went, I'd already processed most of my feelings about him. Or at least I thought I had. Growing up with him wasn't easy. He came back from Vietnam with a lot of anger and a lot of demons he never dealt with. Instead of getting help, he drank. And when he drank, he got mean. My mom tried to shield us from the worst of it, but there's only so much you can do when you're living in the same house as someone who's constantly on edge. I learned pretty early on that humor was my way out, and if I could make a joke about something, it didn't hurt as much. And over the years, that became my default mode for dealing with anything uncomfortable. My co-worker was quiet for a bit after that, probably still processing what I'd said. Then he asked if he could ask me something else. I said sure. He wanted to know if I ever felt guilty about it, like for not being sadder or whatever. I told him that sometimes I did, but then I remembered that my dad had a whole life to get his act together, and he didn't. So why should I carry that weight around? He said that was fair. I added that it wasn't like I hated my dad or anything. He was who he was. And yeah, he sucked a lot of the time, but he also taught me some useful stuff, like how to change a tire and how to tell when someone's full of crap. My co-worker agreed that those were silver linings. We pulled into his driveway a few minutes later. He grabbed his bag from the back seat and paused before getting out. He thanked me for the ride and for being cool about everything. I told him it was no problem and thanked him for giving me the best laugh I'd had all week. He grinned and shut the door behind him. I drove off, looking in the rearview mirror, and caught sight of the cemetery in the distance, just barely visible over the hill. I said goodbye to the old man under my breath, and I meant it, not in a sentimental way or anything like that, just as an acknowledgement that he existed and that I survived him. That felt like enough. When I got home later that evening, I told my partner about what happened. They'd heard plenty of stories about my dad before, so they weren't surprised by my reaction. My partner joked that only I would turn a drive past a cemetery into a comedy routine. I said that what could I say, it was a gift. They asked if I thought my coworker would ever ask me personal questions again. I said probably not, but if he did, at least now he knew what he was getting into. We both laughed at that, and honestly, I wouldn't have it any other way. Life's too short to spend it being miserable about things you can't change. My dad made his choices and I made mine. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.